Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 o'clock and we'd like to begin. Thank you. We welcome you to Naperville North this evening. We appreciate that you've come out this evening to learn about the nature of the danger of narcotics in our community, particularly to our youth. While we wish you were in this auditorium for a concert or a musical or next week's Mr. NNHS, and please come back, the concern addressed this evening is literally a life and death issue for our sons and daughters. My name is Kevin Pobst. I happen to have the privilege of being the principal at Naperville North High School. I welcome you this evening. We're calling tonight's program a Narcotics Impact Presentation. It is collaboratively sponsored by the police departments of Naperville and Aurora and the two Naperville school districts, 203 and 204. Following the overwhelming attendance at the 95th Street Library a month ago, both Naperville North High School and Neuqua Valley High Schools volunteered to hold similar presentations so that everyone in the communities who want to participate have an opportunity to do so. Neuqua Valley is hosting a similar forum this Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in their auditorium. This evening's presentation begins, and I want to lay out for you the structure of the presentation so you know what to expect as we go through the evening. This evening's presentation will begin with 3 quick welcomes and introductions from our District 203 Superintendent Mark Mitrovich, U.S. Congresswoman Judy Biggert, and Deputy Chief Gary Bolt of the Naperville Police Department. Following those quick introductions, 2 detectives from the Naperville Police Department, Sean Ferguson and Mike Umbenhauer, did I get it right? Will offer an extended presentation about the current narcotics situation in Naperville. They will be followed by Claudia Evenson, a certified supervisor, alcohol drug counselor with over 30 years of experience in the field and in our neighborhoods. We will then take a short break, very short, about 5 minutes, so that people who would like to leave at that point can, and those who would like to ask questions of a panel that will follow can enter them electronically online. And I'll explain to you how to do that when we get to that point. We will then reconvene and a panel will respond to some of your questions. We expect there to be more questions than the panel can respond to, but we will pass the questions along to the panel. That panel will include the 2 detectives, Mrs. Evenson, and also Jeff Farson, Director of Student Services at Naperville North High School, Audrey Anderson, Assistant State's Attorney for DuPage County, and NPD Officer Russ Davis, the Student Resource Officer at Naperville North High School. My colleague Bill Wiesbrook, Principal of Naperville Central High School, will close the evening no later than 9:15. This presentation is being streamed live by NCTV 17 through a collaboration with the organizers and with Kids Matter. The presentation will begin airing this weekend on Channel 17 in reruns. Check the Channel 17 website for dates and times. We thank NCTV for bringing this presentation to the public, both live and online. I would like to thank the social workers of Naperville North High School and Naperville Central High School who organized the details of this event. Brent Terada of Naperville North High School, who's behind me, and Amy Barth of Naperville Central High School, also behind me, were the lead organizers. Supporting them are their colleagues, Sarah Galdikis, Lisa Catalano, and Robin Amberger of Naperville North High School, and April Carlson, Lisa Moen, and Tracy Fertel of Naperville Central High School. Again, we thank you for your participation this evening. Now, Superintendent Mark Mitrovich of District 203.
I've often heard the comment that the students or the children in any community have a drug problem. The issue that we all know is that every one of our communities has a drug problem, and the drug problem that faces our children will only be addressed when the community recognizes the scope of their problem and begins to address it on that level. I want to thank you on behalf of the Naperville 203 Board of Directors, administration, and the staff for taking the time to come out and hear this presentation tonight. Those of us involved with the school district are all too aware of the challenges that our young people face. And quite often, they don't want to face those in the public. They want to deal with them privately. Families want to find ways where they can find real solutions to the real challenges they're facing. And we all know while that works on an individual basis, the only way that you're going to address it on a large basis is when a community galvanizes itself around a cause. We have wonderful leadership in the Naperville Police Department, the Aurora Police Department. We have concerted efforts between our two school districts and other school districts in the area. We have Kids Matters. We have the collaborative youth teams in this community that are trying to address this in a more holistic fashion. And so meetings such as this and the energy that they create are the very thing that we hope we can harness to try to address what we know is an epidemic, and one that will take and attack our children one at a time. And that's how we're going to have to stop it, with each of our individual children, but collectively as a group working together. One of the people who has this very much on her heart is the person I would like to introduce to you now, and that is our Congresswoman, the Honorable Judy Biggert. Judy.
I thank you for that kind introduction and allowing me to join you this evening. First and foremost, I want to commend the School District 203 and 204, the Naperville and Aurora Police Departments, teachers, social workers, and parents who have come together to tackle the problem of teen drug use head on. For more than a decade, I've had the honor of representing Naperville in Washington, and I am so impressed with the willingness of this community to take a forward-thinking approach to even the most uncomfortable of topics. When it comes to the use of heroin and other drugs by our children, we simply cannot look the other way. From what I understand, heroin use has claimed the lives of 7 area teenagers in recent months. One drug-related death is one too many. It's a heartbreaking tragedy that all of us pray we never have to experience in our own families or any family. But as our police officers, drug counselors, and teachers will tell you, effective prevention is the most important weapon in this battle. By participating in tonight's forum, each of you has made drug prevention a priority, and shortly we'll hear from those on the front line who know more about how our young people are accessing drugs, the temptations, warning signs, and important steps that we can take to help keep the drugs out of our schools and out of our communities. I want you to know that you have my full support. I stand ready to do whatever I can to give our schools and our law enforcement agencies with the resources needed to keep our kids safe. In Washington, I recently wrote a letter to the House Appropriations requesting additional resources for 2 programs that assist law enforcement in fighting drugs, the Burn JAG and the Community-Oriented Policy Service Grant. And I will continue to identify new opportunities to partner in your efforts. Not only as your member of Congress, but as a mother and grandmother, please know that I stand with you to create a united front in the fight against drug use. Finally, do not hesitate to contact me with your suggestions on how I can help Aurora, Naperville, and our surrounding communities curb drug use. Thank you very much. I love being here.
Good evening. I'd first like to thank Congresswoman Biggert for being here tonight. She has a busy schedule, and we're very appreciative of her taking the time to be here and support us in this initiative. On behalf of Chief David Dial, who was not able to be here this evening, he's at a council meeting, I too want to welcome you. My remarks are going to be brief. I think we want to accomplish 2 things this evening. First, we want to make sure we raise awareness about this issue, not just in our community, but this is an issue across the country. Second, we hope we can provide some material and educate you a little bit more about this topic. I think the more we can raise awareness and educate our community, I think the better off we will be. And one additional thing I would like to add is we cannot do this without your help and support. We've had a great partnership with both of our school districts and everyone that's been involved, and I'm particularly want to thank District 203 and Naperville North for hosting this evening. At this time, I'd like to introduce the two main speakers in the presentation this evening. They work for the Naperville Police Department, work out of our Special Operations Group that does a lot of narcotics enforcement, and I will turn the program over to them at this time, Detectives Sean Ferguson and Mike Umbenauer.
Okay, real quick, I'm Sean Ferguson, by the way, and that's my partner, Mike Umbenauer. We've been in the drug unit. I've been there for 3 years. Mike's been there for a little shorter than that. I've been in police work for about 11 years. Mike's been in police work a lot longer than that, 16 years. Mike and I first started looking at this situation, and you kind of get a gut feeling. They call it gut feeling in police work. We thought we'd start seeing a little bit more from the arrests the contact patrol officers were making related to heroin. And us knowing kind of a little bit more about heroin and how dangerous that could be, we went back and looked at some of the statistics, and it kind of supported what we saw. In 2009, we invested as an agency in a new way to track some of this stuff, and once you work a little bit of the kinks out with the data, you find out some information that clearly supports that, and that's what this is based upon.
And again, we really appreciate the opportunity to come up on the north side of Naperville. We've done it central and also on the south, so this is kind of a new thing for us, and we're glad to be here, so thank you all for coming. In this program, just so you guys are aware, and there's a disclaimer in there, there are some death scene photos. We put them in there because, you know, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and it's a reality of the matter. So if anyone has a problem or issue with that, we'll let you know when they're coming. But unfortunately, it is a, like I said, it's a reality of the matter. We can get our pointer to work here.
Is it on, Mike?
Bear with us 1 second. We actually tested this yesterday. I know it seems crazy. Yeah, pointer's not working. Don't work yet. I'm glad we did a dry run yesterday. All right, we should be able to get this up and running in a second.
There you go, there's one.
All right, again, if you guys want to read this, just be aware of it. And it's not working again.
Okay, we can go to the next slide, right?
Yeah, we're gonna have to go the old-fashioned manual here.
All right, first we're going to start off and let you know, between 2009 and 2011, the total amount of narcotics arrests that we made within the city limits of Naperville or affecting the city limits of Naperville. Cannabis is obviously king. That's what we tell everybody. Weed is so prevalent. When I say cannabis, weed, it's the same thing. If you hear some slang and you don't understand necessarily what it is, we'll try to clarify that, but cannabis we'll call weed so people understand what it is, so you hear that term coming from your kids or whoever. That's what you understand. 74% of the total arrests that we made were cannabis. The reason we show that is people say, oh, cannabis, weed is not a gateway drug. Well, we have found that to be a little bit different. There are a lot of folks right now, particularly California, states like that are saying, hey, legalize it, it's all good. We can't even begin to tell you the amount of problems we're seeing with weed that's coming in from California that they're not doing a good job of keeping control of under medical marijuana. The next highest is obviously heroin, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight.
Next slide.
All right, when you remove the cannabis and you look at the hard drugs, you'll see that prescription drugs as well as heroin are hand in hand. Throughout this presentation, you're going to see how they go hand in hand, and you'll see that the bulk of the work that we do within the city limits of Naperville, because both of those things right now are very accessible to all of us. Some of it legally, some of it obviously illegally. But how you can get to it, what it affects, how it progresses in the addict's life, you can understand that here, hopefully by the end of the presentation.
Next slide.
All right, cannabis arrests, again, we talk about that. The most of what we see, the highest numbers are people in just mere possession of it. Those are the highest numbers there throughout 2009 and 2011. And then the next thing we deal with are people that are selling it, which is the 30 grams and above. People that are in possession more than 30 grams of it generally are selling it. I mean, if you can smoke that much weed, all the power to you. Sooner or later, you're going to probably die of lung cancer. But the bottom line is that's the number that we look at.
Yeah, there's also a fallacy that's going around that it's just weed, it's just cannabis. It is not the cannabis that it was years ago. Cannabis years ago had a THC or potency content of maybe 3–4%. Now it's upwards of 30% and above. It is a scientifically altered and it is cultivated in such a way that you really get the best bang for your buck. So don't think that it is what it was years ago. I mean, we've had a homicide in town over cannabis. Don't underestimate it.
Largely when we do drug cases, the money cases involve cannabis because there's a lot of money to be made doing it. And I think legalization is probably not an answer that a lot of people look for. Again, just like the drug mills in Florida, California is having a whole lot of issues of keeping control of the cannabis within their border for legalized medical reasons. And I could walk into a doctor's office in California right now and say my back hurts, and they'll go, okay, here you have a prescription of weed if I fought it enough. It's the same kind of thing. Those kind of things are being branched out, and we're seeing effects of that all the way here in Illinois. Can't tell you how many times with our DEA partners we take on the trains that stop in Naperville, which is a good stop before they get in the city because the city's on it. How often you see guys getting off the train with, guys and girls for that matter, with up to 20, 50 pounds of weed they're carrying with them across country, and it's just because the market's here for it.
And here's another scary fact, too, is that we are starting to see young people selling younger and younger in school. It's not uncommon to see cannabis selling in middle school.
One of the things that goes hand in hand with cannabis arrests is obviously drug paraphernalia. Contrary to popular belief, people that smoke weed are lazy. I mean, we've seen that firsthand. I mean, it's the kind of thing you smoke weed, you get a little lazy. It makes you lethargic. It doesn't make you want to fight with the police, but in the same sense, people usually pack bowls. And when we say a bowl, it's a glass pipe of some sort or a bong. We go into houses and do search warrants. There's 6 or 7 bongs sitting in a kid's room. You can smell it as soon as you walk in the front door. You approach the parents about it, and they said, well, I thought something was going on. I didn't really think it was my place to go in there and check the room. And you kind of say, folks, that's why we're fighting this losing battle. Because, again, as you'll see later on, cannabis starts somebody out. They move on to prescription drugs. They end up with heroin because that's the cheapest, most available drug to them. Drug paraphernalia numbers are on the rise as well because with heroin use, what goes with that is needles. People start out snorting it because they think that's a safer way of doing it, but now because of the Hypodermic Needles Act, I think it was passed in 2003, you can have up to 20 needles in your possession if you are non-diabetic. It used to be you had to have a medical reason to have those. Now you can go in there, if you're over the age of 18, you can purchase them basically over the counter, have them in your possession. Because they wanted to try, for good reasons, the legislators looked at it and said, well, we need to try to stop the spread of HIV because dirty needles was a huge cause of that. Sexual relations, unprotected sex, and dirty needles. Well, that's changed. And as you can imagine, again, not to knock heroin users here, but they're not responsible people. They'll pitch their needles in places, and Mike can probably tell you a myriad of stuff, but they pitch them in places that you could never imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon for us to find needles on parkways, up and down streets, up and down Napier Boulevard, Ogden Avenue, 75th Street. Parks, they're in garbage cans at gas stations, coffee shops, if you like your Caribou and your Starbucks, they're in there sometimes, gas station. Point being, the unintended consequences of all this is that, heaven forbid, somebody goes in there and gets pricked by a needle, or a kid finds it, and that's the last thing we want to have happen. I'm armed with a new pointer. Let's give it a shot.
Let's hopefully it works.
All right.
Yes. Hey. All right, as you guys can see here, this is just a quick graph to look at. The arrests that we've made by year, prescription drugs and heroin are the ones that are on the rise. Should give us some concern as an agency. People say, well, that's not a lot of numbers for people in a town of 150,000 people. But when you look at the numbers, they're on the climb. The two things that are concerning about that is what we see nationally as a trend, where you start with weed, you move on to prescription drugs, and then you go on to heroin. We're seeing that numbers. Right now, through the first quarter, you'll see a slide a little later, we're on pace to match the numbers from last year. Total dealer arrests, again, cannabis is king. We arrest the most people with weed just simply because it's so prevalent. It's like running, a speed radar gun. You're going to get people sooner or later because that's what people do. Weed is at that level. It's glamorized by the media. It's talked about like, hey, what's the big deal about it? We all know what the big deal is about it. It leads to other things, and that's the thing that we need to be concerned about. From a law enforcement perspective, I'd much rather deal with somebody that was stoned than somebody that was a drunk. Men and women included. A drunk woman is probably the most angry thing you could deal with because everything's let go. There's tons of pressure and emotion that's released at that time, and you're generally going to get kicked in the groin if you're not watching what you're doing as a police officer. But that being said, it's still a problem that leads to a lot of the other things that go on there. People sell weed often to support their habit. All too often we've met heroin addicts that sell weed to simply support their heroin addiction. Go ahead, Mike, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
The other drugs up there are pretty consistent with what we see in the burbs, cocaine and ecstasy. That's a drug that's a little more commensurate with upper white middle class suburbs like Naperville. Those drugs were a problem here for a while. They've kind of been kept under control, but it is what it is. It's a drug that's not as addictive as heroin, but we're seeing heroin creep up for dealers, particularly folks that would want to come to this area and start selling it. When you look at prescription drugs, what we've broken that down, we had to go line by line, report by report to find out when someone was arrested for a prescription medication that they shouldn't have had in their possession. Generally, it was a young person, and largely was a drug that they shouldn't have had, meaning like they didn't have a prescription for it. And most of the ones that we're seeing are opiates. Opiates, obviously, are what heroin eventually, the addiction becomes. They get addicted to pills, whether it be from lying around in their house, parents not keeping accountability of it. I mean, there's so many things going on in our life, I can't imagine that every single day I'd have to take my prescription drugs out of my medicine cabinet. But I liken it to people with my kids. I have 3 sons, and they're fascinated by manly things, because that's what I want my sons to be. It'd be like if I came home and put my gun down on the counter, loaded, and walked away at night, and thought, well, I guess nothing's going to really happen with that. The devastating impact would be instantaneous, and it'd be horrific for me. The same thing happens with prescription drugs. If you leave them laying around, you don't keep track of them, you don't have an accountability for them, eventually you're going to get your kid addicted to some drug that they could or couldn't. Again, a lot of it's just peer pressure. Hey, try this, man. My parents got these oxys, try them out. Boom. Before you know it, hey, man, that makes me feel good. I'm going to keep doing it. And again, you just get your prescription filled. You don't keep count of them. Well, we got to count pills when we ever arrest anybody, just to make sure that we got the right count. We know what's going on. The same thing should be going on in your home, because if you don't, you're going to lead them down a path they definitely don't want to be on.
If anyone has a concern about prescription medication in your home, believe it or not, if you go to Walgreens, they have safes for it. They're relatively inexpensive. You can buy one and keep it in your bathroom. Here's another thing that's awfully scary, and we're seeing it more and more. When we do undercover operations, and sometimes when people are buying what they think is crushed up oxy, which is a heavy-duty painkiller, send it out to the lab, get the lab results back, it's actually heroin. People have no idea what they're taking, and they have no idea what they're getting into.
Just on that note, final note on that, the DEA, there's a paradigm shift within that organization right now. They are hiring, it's probably one of the only government entities that's hiring in law enforcement right now, and they're hiring in the field of people that do basically interdiction on prescription medication. Florida had one of the most loose pain clinic laws in there. You could walk in there and get hundreds of them. People from as far away as Ohio, Kentucky, even Illinois were going down there just running as mules far north as Boston, running down there to buy oxys so people could bring them back and sell them in their cities because it was just so prevalent. Florida recently changed the rules to get a little more control of it. Illinois does a good job by and large of controlling it with doctor shopping and everything else, but you'll find them. You'll find bad doctors. You'll find, pharmacists, everything in the process. But the DEA has taken on a huge shift from going off of what are normal, illegal drugs to prescription drugs, which, by the way, is another argument, in my estimation, against legalizing it. Because prescription medication is all legal medication that enters into the market. How you get it and the black market for it is the alternative problem with it. The next thing we look at is the arrestee addresses. Where are these people from that we're arresting for narcotics? Largely Naperville, because we're the Naperville Police Department. The next biggest one is Aurora, a border town that's about the same size. Between the two of us, we're over 250,000 people. When you include Joliet, Plainfield, Bolingbrook, all the other towns in here, you're talking like a metro area with that many people in it outside the city of Chicago that has the worst heroin problem in the United States of America. More heroin is coming in and out of Chicago than anywhere else in the United States. It's white powder heroin. It's not black tar, contrary to popular belief. Again, Chicago's that problem. You're talking about a metropolitan area where you're talking 500,000 people maybe out here between those cities that I just mentioned. It's an issue to contend with. And as you can see, those surrounding towns are ones that we deal with quite a bit. The others are people that are just wrong place, wrong time, or other places in Illinois, or other places in the country.
Heroin is incredibly cheap right now, and it's very easily accessible here. It's never had the potency that it has right now. For 10, 20 bucks, someone can go and they can buy some heroin, and that's enough to start an addiction and also get a high. Incredibly cheap. All
right, drug arrest by gender. Lady, there's a glass ceiling. You don't want to break through right there. 22% of you. We're seeing an uptick with women. And again, we take it from our law enforcement perspective, and this is not meant to be sexist in any way, but when you start seeing women fall, there's grave concern in here. You're the backbone of our society. You're the ones that sets the limits, sets the rules. You're not the ones jumping off roofs, driving fast cars, and doing all the crazy stuff that guys do. So when women generally start falling into that, we have great concern for that. It obviously triggers a lot of emotions in our society, in our community as well, because we had some recent arrests, deaths related to females that really got a lot of people thinking and talk about it. Mike and I would talk about it in the office, and we started doing this, 12 people would show up. 12 people would show up to a problem that we saw that was coming. I said to him in the office like 6 weeks before it happened, I said, all we're going to need is a young lady to die. I said, God, I hope it doesn't happen, but the bottom line, if it does, it's going to change everything. Since then, thing has been going gangbusters. The lowest crowd we had was 100 people. This is obviously more than that tonight. The thing at the library was completely unexpected after that. And again, it's an event that wakes people up. And whatever it is, it's a catalyst to get people going. All I can do is thank my maker that, the good that came from that was that more and more people are paying attention to this.
And that was our big goal when we started out doing this, is that we needed to get some lines of communication going here, because especially last fall, towards the end of last summer, nobody wanted to talk about this. And I realize that there's a lot of denial that goes with it and stigma, but we need to move past it, and we need to wrap our arms around some of it to deal with it.
All right, this is basically a demographic of our town. That's the largest percentage of people being arrested, or the largest percentage of people that live here. Same thing breaks it down. It breaks it down by drugs and then by cannabis. So you can see there's really not much to that other than to show what it is by race. Cannabis arrest by age and sex. We wanted to show you this again because cannabis, I don't care what anybody says, and people are going to probably think I'm controversial for saying this, but cannabis is a gateway drug. In this day and age, it's a gateway drug. It's one of those drugs that if we interview every heroin addict that comes through, somebody in our 10-man unit interviews them, and every single heroin addict says, I started in weed. In a town of 150,000 people, fourth largest city in this state, you got to start looking at it and going, okay, maybe some of the myths in the past about, hey, this isn't the weed from, Woodstock, where everything was peace and love. This is a little more strong stuff. The analogy I use for that is I say to people, my grandmother was born in 1907. She didn't need a navel orange until well after the 60s. The same thing is happening with weed right now. There's a lot of money in it. And the more we go towards medical marijuana, it being legalized, the money's there. People are going to basically become horticulturalists for weed. And they're going to make it stronger and more powerful. People say, well, we'll legalize it. Do you think the government's going to buy into selling weed, being part of taxing weed that's 30, 40% THC if it ever gets to that point? No way. It's going to be, no, just like alcohol. They're going to drop the proof on it, and it's going to be that low, and there'll be a huge black market for it, because we've had a generation of people that are going to be smoking 30% THC. We're going to hand them something that's 8 to 10% THC. If that's even what the government agreed to, if they ever decided to legalize it, there'll be a huge black market for it. There's a huge black market for it now in California. Like Mike said, we had a homicide in town related to weed. People go, oh, no, weed's not a big deal. Weed's a big deal. I don't know, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but it's a big deal. It's something that you can get off it rather easily, but the problem is the people in their 20s try that early age, in the teens, it spikes up. We joke, we say that's the Ron Paul demographic. They're the people that are going to tell you that, hey, yeah, legalize weed because it's all cool, man. It doesn't do anything to people. But generally you see it start to taper off because people get responsible. They get a life. Maybe we don't target as many 50-year-olds as we should do for smoking weed. I don't know. But the bottom line is that it starts to taper off because we get on with life. We realize, hey, most of us can walk away from it and deal with it. But the pitfall that we see is that it's a lot more THC in it, and there's a lot more drawn to it for people. It's glamorized in the culture, glamorized in the media, glamorized in rap, all sorts of things that, we're fighting a losing battle with it. Drug arrest by age. This is one that if you look at any slide here that seems to be very boring, try to pay attention to this one. Because what we talk about, this is the total number of drug arrests that we make by age group in 10-year bands. As you can see, the 20 to 29-year-olds the highest, because people get out there, they get their own money. Nobody's watching them as much anymore. They go to college, parents aren't over their shoulders, schoolmates, whatever, people aren't watching what they're doing. You see that number climb up. And then either people deal with what they got to deal with, get off it, see an addiction specialist if they develop an addiction, or they can walk away from it cold turkey, or in plain English, they die. It's that simple when you're talking about heroin. You die if you continue to do this. There's a 50-50 chance when you do heroin that you're going to die from doing it. And it could come quickly, or it could come later on in life. You could die several times while doing it and be brought back. But the bottom line is that's why it drops off. But the number that you should be concerned about with the 14 to 19-year-olds, you look at the prescription drug numbers, the people being arrested in that age band for that. Those people are going to flip over in their 20 to 29 years when they run out of money, and doctors that'll sell them, and parents that'll not figure out that they're maybe stealing meds, or friends that are willing to sell it to them. They'll flip to heroin because it's cheaper, it's easier to get, and nobody's watching what they're doing.
Right now, we're down to about a 15-year-old addict in town, and that is full-blown IV user. And that's just the age that we know about, because there's people that go to the hospital, there's people who are dealing with addictions counselors and private practices that we don't know about. But 15, which is a scary age, minus the drug use, it's eye-opening.
Okay, this is the drug arrest by locations within town. Obviously the north, which is where we're conducting this, that's a high number, but don't be completely disheartened by that. We do have quite a few businesses up here. We have hotels up here that we do a lot of interdiction on. A lot of prostitution stings also net us, as you can imagine, a lot of drugs. So that number gets thrown off a little bit. The south end of town is like what we've called it kind of ground zero. That's the residential area of our city. There's not as many businesses down there. It's more homes than anything else. If you've been on the south end of town, you know what it's like down there. There's a lot of money, too. There's a lot of money. And that money can be sent down to the city to buy heroin or other drugs, and we just see that. Central, I don't know why it's a little bit lower. I think it's probably a little more older, more established part of town. Don't know what the demographics are for that. But you also roll the central business district into the downtown. Most of our problems there are alcohol-related because that's where the bars and stuff are. And then outside city limits and warrants are the other factor. But just look at that and see where our residential areas are and see where some of our businesses are. It's kind of a breakdown so you understand where the arrests are occurring.
And we're going to talk about, too, how heroin is quite a social drug and how it can easily network and spread. We'll get to that in a little bit.
All right, just some interesting stats from teen drug use trends, I should say. 2010 to 2011, a 78% increase in felony drug arrests among Makerville teens from 14 to 19 years old. We can talk about it a little bit later if you got some questions specifically about the juvenile law aspect of prosecution. Audrey's here to talk about that. But if you're a 17-year-old, if I'm getting this right, you're a 17-year-old, and this is a recent change in the law, you're committing a felony, you're considered an adult. Illinois has got a strange law compared to other ones. Whether you're at 17 or 18, you're considered an adult, and there's no kind of ifs, ands, or buts. If you're 17 and you're a misdemeanor, you committed a misdemeanor offense. Most drug offenses are not misdemeanor offenses when you're talking about hard drugs. Weed, dependent upon the weight, is what affects that. But that's an increase there, 78% in 1 year. The big number, 2010 to 2011, is 450% increase in heroin arrests that we know of as an agency, as a police agency. This isn't numbers where we've responded to homes for ODs or whatever. This is just people that we've arrested for people that age. It's a little concerning on our part because it's getting younger and younger and higher.
Part of our group, obviously, is to address drug issues in town, and that's what we do, and we're going to keep doing it. We're committed to it. Every time we arrest somebody, every time we make an arrest, especially for heroin, 6, 7, 8 more names come up that we've never, ever even heard of. And it keeps growing and growing. That's why we wanted to get out. We need to start, you guys are parents. You guys are on the front line just like we are too. This is a growing problem, and it easily spreads.
2012, like I said, we're kind of on track from the previous year. See 127 cannabis arrests so far from January 1st. 7 of them were related to distribution. The biggest number of narcotics arrests, again, is 10. That could be partially because we're focusing on it, but also I believe it's because it's becoming more prevalent. You see 3 of them were female, 7 were male. The oldest was 42, one of an anomaly. The youngest was 17, the median age was 27. 5 of the arrests were related to dealing heroin. That's something to be concerned about. People are starting to come here and see this as a market. 3 warrants we still have outstanding. So those numbers, if those folks were arrested on the warrants, we were able to locate them, that would be probably, it'll be 13 total. There are the rest of the breakdown. We have 3 known heroin-related drug overdoses resulting in 1 death. And again, I can't thank the folks of the fire department to getting there and taking care of it quick enough, getting the Narcan into the individual, getting him treated, and getting him back out. One of the problems that we have seen with that, unfortunately, which is a little heartbreaking from a law enforcement perspective, is that the day after somebody is going towards the light and they get pulled back, 1, they're aggravated that they didn't get to go towards the light, and 2, they go right back to what they were almost dying from. Every single one of them that we see. And that's overdoses that we know about.
And to show you how addictive this is, there's one guy who has technically died 3 times, and he's been brought back. The day after, he keeps going and get more. These guys get angry when the fire department brings them out of it. because they got cheated out of a high. That is just the way it is. It is a stone cold, nasty drug.
Okay, how do they get it? Where do they go to? You all have heard of the heroin highway before, I'm assuming. Everybody knows what that's at. We live right along it, folks. 88 runs right through it. And it's starting to spread out to Aurora and even further west from here. But the bottom line is we looked at Naperville, 88 out to 290. Hillside Strangler, they get on that. They're rolling right towards the city. It used to be primarily they went to K-Town. The reason they call it K-Town in the city is because all the Kedzie, the K streets, like Kedzie, all the K-Town basically, runs north and south throughout the city. But that area is an open market for drug dealing. We go down there on a day-to-day basis, following people down there to see what they're up to, what the deal is. We have a guy that works in the DEA group. He's what they call an officer assigned to it, basically. And he's going down. They're going down there and getting the purity of it by just doing buys themselves. It's 85% pure heroin. You can get that on any street corner throughout Maywood and K-Town. And Mike Cordier and I, a guy that works in our unit, we went down there and watched the guy do a deal unrelated to Naperville. It's pretty obvious to spot who's from Naperville or the western suburbs in the west side of Chicago. And I'm just saying that to say it. I mean, it's pretty evident. It's a demographic thing, and it's pretty simple. The car's not trashed. They're usually white kids, and they're usually looking like teenagers. They come in there, squad car from Chicago, not knocking Chicago, sitting probably 50 yards from we watched the hand-to-hand drug transaction. We're waiting for that car to light up because we're in an unmarked car. Nothing happened. It's that prevalent down there. There's that much politic behind it, as well as people that are involved in doing what they're doing. But don't think that we're exempt from anything going on down there. The violence that you see and read about in Chicago every weekend, gun violence, money from this town is going down there to finance it. I'm not saying it's all of it. I'm not saying that it's strictly just our fault, but it's a big deal. The drug violence that occurs there occurs over turf, and there's plenty of people coming down there to buy it. The dealers that live there, they don't do it. They don't touch it. They grew up around it. They know how dangerous it is. We arrest these guys out of the city, the first thing in their mouth is, I don't mess with that stuff. What do you think, I'm stupid? I mean, they have probably the worst education you could possibly get, pay for tax-wise, and they're smart enough to know that you touch that stuff, they saw their parents die from it, their aunts, uncles, a generation thing. These kids that come from the city, they straight up know it's a money-making venture from kids from the burbs, and they're even willing to come out here and start doing it now.
When a car rolls down from someone's looking to pick up some heroin, they usually pull into an alley, even on a street corner. It could be at a gas station, whatever. They're going to meet up with their dealer, someone that they've been comfortable with for some time. There could be 5, 6 guys hanging on a corner. And again, this is their job. This is what they do. They're going to be yelling, bags, bags, bags. You pull up, you buy, you're in and out. You're hopping back on 290, you're heading back. Some people cannot wait until they get back. They're either shooting up as they're driving, or they're snorting as they're driving. So you're doing 75, 65 miles an hour in the fast lane on the Eisenhower coming back. You know, imagine the consequences. Your loved one, your family, you guys, someone's coming home from work, and one of these people hit you because they're nodding off from doing heroin, doing 70 miles an hour. We're seeing that on Ogden Avenue. Guys nodding off at traffic lights, guys driving. Heaven forbid somebody gets killed from that.
Okay, this is just kind of a list to show like how many suspected heroin users we have that we knew of at the end of 2011 going into 2012 here. Well, when I first got in the unit, like I said, 3.5 years ago, the detective kept a pretty comprehensive list of the amount of people that were suspected drug users, around 24 to 30. Some of the people fell off, obviously, because they deceased. We just passed the century mark 3 years later, and that's what we know of. Every time we make a stop, we get more information about more and more people doing it, and 9 times out of 10, we find out that that's the case. Somebody's either arrested by us, Chicago, another town, another suburb, and they call it PCS, possession of controlled substance. You hear that term, I got arrested for PCS. That means you got arrested for a hard drug. You got arrested for it, and generally it's heroin, and it's unfortunate. One of the things we're seeing when folks are coming back from the city, they're getting what they can, and then they're bringing back stuff for their friends. What does that make that person? A drug dealer, basically. It's not, hey, I'm looking out for my friends, I'm just picking up. Generally what happens is they get money to drive down because they got the resources in the car because their parents didn't figure out what was up. They get them the money, drive down there, they're coming back and bigging for their friend. Oh, I'm just getting gas money at it. Well, you're receiving something, a payment for something for that. That makes you somebody that's distributing, or you have the intent to distribute that drug. Your kids now, or our kids now, a drug dealer. They don't look at it like that. The other thing they're doing is they're inserting. They're using body cavities to hide it from us. that makes it much more difficult for us to deal with. And the fact is that we've got to get them the medical attention they need. You get them to the hospital has to sit it out and watch what's happening. And one of those things bursts inside of you in the interim. We're trying to do what we can do to get the person the medical attention that they need. They could pass away from it. There's all sorts of risks. There's no love greater than heroin in a heroin addict's life. Mom, brothers, sisters, it doesn't matter. The reason we show this is to show you, like Mike said, heroin's a social drug. It's not what is, glamorized by the media where you're shooting up and you're found dead by yourself somewhere, because that's where it was. It's a very, very social drug. There's a term called misery loves company, and that applies to heroin. Very rarely do you find a heroin user by themselves. The only folks that are by themselves or random users or dealers are folks that either come into this town to sell and they don't know anybody else, or people we arrest for prostitution. And that's a very solitary, awful life to begin with. But that one to the left there, it's like a spider web. And what we found as a demographic is that you've got a situation, and this is just in our town, and it's not casting aspersions on anybody, but the guilt of conscience goes a long way in this. What you find is you got a kid that's got something going on in his life that ain't good, whether it's everything as awful as sexually assaulted all the way down to my parents are splitting up. And you got a parent, a single parent in a house that's trying to cover all the bases, and usually it's a woman that's trying to cover all the bases, trying to make things up to their kids for failures that have happened. And what happens is they start maybe breaking the rules a little bit. Smoke weed with us. I know you're here at least. You're safe. I'm the cool mom. I'm the cool dad. Don't worry about it. I'll drive everybody home, whatever. Well, it starts progressing into something worse, and then it starts spinning more and more out of control. The mom's got to go to work eventually, and the kid's going to invite his friends over. Well, the friends start coming over. Hey, I never saw heroin before. I come from a normal family. My parents are cool. I mean, they're together. They're doing everything they do. My father disciplines me. My mom sets the example in the house, does whatever. Bottom line is the kid gets introduced to it. Now, you don't have to be, have an addiction that's maybe part of a genetic aspect, or you come from a long line of it, or you've seen it your entire life. Now you're doing it because its addictive qualities are pretty high. Then it starts to spin more and more out of control, and then that house becomes, for all intents and purposes, a shoot house. That's where people go to do drugs because nobody's watching what's going on. And when we get involved, because neighbors reported to us, leave my kid alone. Haven't they been through enough? Well, I understand your kid's going through a lot, but it's not an excuse to lure other people into it, and it's not an excuse just to do it alone. Bad things happen to people all the time, and there's thousands, millions of people that have overcome bad things happening to them without hurting other people in the process. And that's what we talk about, and that's the point we try to get out to everybody. Is like, the things that are going on in this community we can prevent by sharing information. We're not about the police that just coming in and arresting everybody we possibly can, and we don't care what happens with it. We want to drive this out of town because one of us in polyester has to stand over your deceased child. And we have to stare at that kid when they're staring at us and they ain't blinking. And it's the last thing you see when you close your eyes as a police officer or a firefighter. I know I signed up for this. I'm not asking for anybody's sympathy. But what I'm saying is somebody has to deal with it because it's now spun out of control from your house and taking care of business.
We get phone calls sometimes from parents. I remember I got a phone call from a lady who said that she was worried about her son and that she would continuously check on him when he's sleeping to make sure he didn't die because he was a heroin addict. She was continuously stealing stuff from them, and she'd always check him for a pulse. She would call me a couple times. She never called back. But there was one time that she called me, and she was driving around the neighborhood in her car because she did not want her husband to find out that she was calling because, she would be in trouble for it. There's also parents in town who lock up all their valuables at night because they know if they don't, especially sometimes they put it in their trunk, they know if they don't, that stuff's going to be pawned so fast that you wouldn't believe for their son or daughter to score some heroin. My point is this, is that there's help out there for parents. There's support groups. You can't bear this alone. It is impossible. This beast needs help from outside. You can't shoulder this on your own. Can't tell you enough how important it is for parents to be on the same page together and to be united. Because what an addict does is they're masters of manipulation. They know exactly how to twist people. They know how to work parents against each other. They know exactly what buttons to push, and they know how to get away with it. Because there's always a parent that will always try to help them, and there's always a parent who's always trying to discipline. It's a dangerous, dangerous situation because that environment creates an enabling that's almost as bad as the drug itself, if not even worse.
Okay, here are the drug overdoses between 29 and 2011. There's 25 total overdoses, which means that somebody overdosed but maybe didn't pass away. 10 of those were heroin related, 7 drug deaths, and 6 of those were from heroin. That's a mix of opiates, maybe heroin, whatever, but that's what we looked at in 2011. That was the number that got everybody kind of concerned. Right now, we dodged 2 bullets in the first quarter that we know of. Hopefully we're going to make an impact. Our goal is to, obviously, as a police department, I'll make no bones about it, is to arrest people, to get them back to the people that can help them, like their parents, counselors, drug court, whatever it is. That's our goal. We're not going to take maybe this guy, we can cut him a break because this kind of bad thing happened to him. We can't do it. There's too many unintended consequences associated with heroin. Start spinning out of control in your neighborhood. We can't stand on the sideline with it. It has a very high addiction rate, a very high death rate. We have to arrest people for this. We have to take away their resources, point it out to parents. But you'd be surprised how often we work with folks on things that are going on. We do it. Sometimes we get burned, and the parents let them use the car. We give it back to them again. Because we can seize your vehicle if you're, driving down to pick up heroin with it. Any money, any resources, your phone, anything you have. Drug seizure law allows us to do that. But our goal is to arrest as many people as we can for it, to raise the level of it. Not to make Naperville look bad, but we got, like Mike said, we got to talk about this as frankly as we possibly can, and we're going to give you back your best commodity. All the money in the world doesn't matter to how much you love your kids. I don't care what anybody says. I got them and I know it. I was a chump one day and then I'm a dad. You know what I mean? And the next day it's like everything doesn't matter. And you do whatever you could to protect them and keep them safe. Everybody in this room feels that way, I'm pretty sure. Bottom line is that you hate the police because we're making you look bad. Oh, it's in the paper, whatever. I'm giving back your kid. There's a woman in Boston, and I watched an interview she did. She said, I used to hate the police, but I can go see my son in prison, and I can hug him, I can touch him, he's smiling, he's still alive, he's eating food, he's not selling everything I got for heroin. So I changed my view about the police and looked at them like it was a different ballgame. I'm not saying all cops are as smooth as me, but in the same sense, the bottom line is that it's something that you need to understand. We're here to work with you on this stuff. We want to give you back what is most precious to our community and our future. One of the things that we look at is decedent's prior police involvement. A decedent is a legal term for somebody that's died. Look at the things that those folks were involved with. The thing that kind of sticks out with the 7 people that died is thefts, burglaries, and property damage. That's prevalent because how they start out is they start by selling all their stuff to support their habit. They start selling all your stuff to support their habit, and then they start selling themselves to support their habit. And if you think that's a bunch of baloney, every prostitute we talk to says they do drugs and they do what they do to support their habit, basically. They have to prostitute themselves out, take the most intimate act 2 humans can share, and turn it into, I make $5,000 a week, of which $4,000 I send on drugs and give to a pimp. And that's exactly what that all comes from. All of these signs were out there for people. These were just law enforcement signs, not addiction signs, things that I don't know as much about as Claudia does and everything like that. These are just from a law enforcement perspective. We still have parents of those kids going, I don't know what's going on. I didn't really know there was anything changing. Your kid was arrested for burglary. That's a felony. You didn't think that that was a change in his behavior, that maybe you should have spent some time and sat down with him? Again, I can't go into every home, but the signs are there just from a law enforcement perspective. Heroin, this is what it looks like. Real quick, in case you see this stuff sitting around your house, I definitely would be concerned about what was going on and not take kind of nonsensical answers from your kids about it. But they're foil packets. That's considered a blow hit or a bag. You hear a guy going, bags, bags, I got bags. That's what that is. It comes, 1/10 of a gram comes in one of those, a hit. A jab is 12 of them. They kind of give you a deal when you buy more. You now are up to a baker's dozen for them out because it's so readily available and so potent in the city of Chicago. We see white powder heroin. We don't see black tar. It's generally 75% of the heroin in the world is produced in Afghanistan. We pay warlords, basically, to grow the poppies in order not to sidle up with the Taliban. They do that. Well, one of the unintended consequences of that is that. So when a lot of people say a 25% approval rating for being in Afghanistan right now, I'm not one of those 25%. It's time for us to come home and figure out something else to do because we're supporting our own habits with that. That stuff comes in through Europe or through Mexico. And again, like I said, Chicago has the single largest market in the United States of America for heroin. You can drive down there one time if you feel like doing it, roll through the neighborhoods. They're probably not going to mess with you because down in those neighborhoods, you're a customer. They're not going to mess with you. They just want to kill the other guy that's selling this stuff. You're a customer down there. They start lighting up people from the burbs, business is going to get bad for them. They don't want that. Go right around there and see what it looks like if you're inclined to do it. I wouldn't do it because I go down there with a gun on and a bulletproof vest. But the bottom line, it's out there. We're not making this up.
Again, the bottom left, that's what you'll frequently see it packaged as. When we stop a car and we start seeing foil, whether it's crumpled up or what, we usually know what we have. So just be aware, aluminum foil, you start seeing it crumpled up in garbage cans at your house, or you know of people who have it like that, you know, someone brings it, hey, I've been finding all this aluminum foil at my house, I don't know where it's coming from. Just be aware, that could be a warning sign.
Okay, here's a little more paraphernalia. You see that, obviously, needles. Despite the fact that you can get 20 clean needles whenever you want, you'd be surprised how often they'll hold on to dirty needles and share them. You can snort it as well. Like I said, the path usually starts, people snort it, then they need a more intense high, because like with any drug, you need more of it to get to where you want to be, and then you start shooting it up. Here's some ejection points. Mind you, these are not people from the city of Naperville. These are things I did during a Google search because I didn't, want to freak anybody out. Like, oh, that's my kid shooting it in her neck. That's not it. The woman with the shooting it in her neck, that's obviously you've reached desperation at that point. We've heard things that people are now injecting it into their eyes, between the webs of their fingers. And I'm telling you, it doesn't surprise me. And I don't think it's a myth. I think it's probably true. We just haven't seen it yet. But generally, you got to tie off that upper left-hand picture. You got a loaded needle with it that's probably not the most sterile of environments. People are trying to mask it and hide it from their friends wherever they can get the veins to it. In their foot, we've seen a lot of kids in town that have passed, have been shooting in their foot, and their parents were like, I didn't even know. I didn't know. And the first thing the ET takes a photograph of is that. In their hands, groins. Some folks that do it long enough run out of good lines to get into. And they start doing some real strange things to get the heroin into their bodies.
They're very, very, very good at hiding it. Like Sean said, and I could not find a picture of it between the fingers, but we are seeing that more and more. When you get somebody in the jail and you ask them to spread their fingers out, you can see it pretty cleanly. But it's easy to hide, and especially from parents. They're not going to be picking up on it. So just be aware of that.
Here's a video of a young lady. How many medical people do we have here right now? Anybody that works in the medical field, like nursing, like phlebotomists or anything like that? Tell me what you think's wrong with this picture, if we can get it running. Just got to click. Go back one. Oh.
That was not me?
No, that was not you. You totally messed this up, huh?
There we go.
Just click on the image.
I think
You put the mouse up on the image and click on it.
Go ahead, guys.
No, that's not it.
There we go.
All right. Just click it once. Okay, there's no sound associated with this. This is happening all over the west side of Chicago and throughout the town of Naperville. Young lady sitting there in control of a car. This is her friend who cooked it up. She's probably thinking because he's cooking it up and he's doing all that stuff, she's a little less culpable in this. I don't have as much of a problem because someone does it for me.
This is becoming more and more popular. You'll find it off of streets off of 75th Street, streets off of Washington. People can't wait to get home. They're pulling off on the streets or courts, and then this is going on. You'll have a neighbor that comes out, sees a car sitting in their street. Never seen it before, puts a call into 911. It's a suspicious car. Our guys come out, and we find 3 or 4 people like this, knotted off.
Not very sterile environment. I don't think that guy went to the upstairs medical college. I don't know what procedure that is to kind of clean it up. I usually do it with my fingertips if I cut him or something like that, but that's pretty bad. And the most dangerous thing is the effect is that girl's still had her seatbelt on. She's going to start that car up in 20 minutes when she's completely nodding off. Like falling asleep while they're driving, and drive that car on an interstate somewhere in our town, in our area. Next slide. All right, this again, we say not in my house. Parents are like, I've never seen it. I don't know what's going on. Up there at the top, that's a toilet that somebody used to kind of hold as another set of hands to cook up their heroin and then shoot it up. The lower left-hand corner, that's you can't see it too clearly, but basically that's consistent with packaging for cannabis that's sold in a larger amount, like at least an ounce. And then you got rolling paper and foil packets in there. You see these things in your homes, folks. You got to start asking your kids questions. And this whole idea, that was my friend's, he left it here. BS, plain English. Get the friend out of your house, never let him come back in again, and tell your kid, if I see this stuff in here again, we're all going to go. A lot of parents will get serious about it. A lot of people go, he just told me it was his friends, What happens when you hang around with your friends? You do what your friends do. Particularly if you're a guy, you definitely do what your friends do. Because that's what we do. You know what I mean? That's why we play football and team sports and all that crazy stuff that we're smashing into things with. But think about that. Don't take excuses from your kids when you see this, or even if that's your kid, a family member, whatever. But that's just something we wanted to show you.
Don't be afraid of searching rooms. Don't be afraid of searching cars that are used. I'm talking about for anyone that you might have living at your house. You have the right to do it. And we get a lot of people telling us, well, if I do that, my son, my daughter's going to be mad at me. I couldn't care less, nor should you. You have to be the parent. You can't be the friend. There's time to be a friend later on. You got to be a parent. You got to be consistent.
All right, one of the crime scene photos we talked about, we did what we could to kind of, clean it up as much as possible, but we call it the final nod. Final nod means you're going to doze off from doing heroin. You nod off and you never come back. Your respiration rate goes down, your heart rate goes down, and you basically die. There's a thing called pulmonary edema, where you drown in this brown mucousy fluid in your own lungs, that you see that, you know you got a problem from a friend staying at your house, your own child, God forbid. But how many more telltale signs could this individual have showed us? That's the worst single day of your life. I could tell you right now, I'd rather be dead than find that. And I think everybody in here would do the same. Like we said in other presentations, that's somebody's baby. Delivered, watch the first steps, watch him go to kindergarten, watch him go to high school, probably get a scholarship, whatever. That's how they end up. It can hit anybody. Prince and pauper in this town. There's nobody that's not affected by this that once it gets their hooks in it. It ain't a socioeconomic thing. It ain't a race thing. It ain't a whatever. The bottom line is if it gets its hooks into you, they say, the Crown Center says, what, 50% chance you're going to die doing it. I'm not a gambler to begin with. There's enough stuff separating me from my money. Think about it. Needle in his pocket. How much more obvious could that be? Go ahead. Another one, death on the battlefield, war on drugs. The reason we're losing the war on drugs, folks, plain and simple, from my estimation, is we forgot the demand side. All we worry about is the supply, the supply, the supply. Well, the suppliers will go away if the demand diminishes. They'll rise the prices and everything else. But do you think if we legalize all this, all these gangs are going to lay down their guns? I say to folks all the time, they said the reason they legalized alcohol is because of the gang violence. How many people do you think Al Capone's gang killed in the time that they were dealing with Prohibition compared to the average DUI driver across the United States of America? Last year was the first year that you more than likely would die in you'd die from a drug overdose than you would from a car crash. DUI drivers kill more people than gang violence ever could. So this whole idea of legalizing stuff and it'll make it a whole lot easier and we'll get this money, it'll be managed better, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. The gangs are going to find something else to mess with. The bottom line, here's another guy, pretty obvious, nodded off with the same tools, the same weapons in his hands, his needle and his spoon. Okay, the paramedics, when they come in, this is what they're going to be bringing into your house if something like this happens. Basically, that stat there comes from Chief Thorough, who sees a lot more of this than we do. On the fire side, they see more than we do on the police side because a lot of this stuff, they get people transported, do whatever. It's not reported. They get them to the hospital, whatever. But Narcan's on there. That's an opiate blocker. They inject that into your kid's system. We've seen that scene from Pulp Fiction, that highly dramatized scene from Pulp Fiction. They stick it in the girl's chest, and oh my God, she's back up, whatever. It kind of has that same effect. It's not the same approach, but it has that same effect where it neutralizes the opiates pretty quickly. And like we said, person's going into the light. That's it. Your life's flashing before your eyes. You're nodding off. The next day, if you survive, you're going to pick up more of the stuff that was sending you there. That's how dangerous this is. But we've seen that much of an increase in those numbers. We talk about, like I said, the police. I hate the police. They're always harassing my kids. They're always harassing teenagers. They're doing what's going on. Look, I understand some of that, some of the nature of that. I came into this job not with any kind of flowery ideas that people were going to like me. But the bottom line is, folks, I don't care if you like me if I'm bringing you back your kid. That's all I care about. I'll take your car. I'll take your kid's money. I'm bringing you back your kid. If you want to lay that kid back on the altar because you don't want to step up and do what you got to do, hey, there's only so much I can do. But the bottom line is that's what I'm going to do. There are two evils in this. There's the idea of, well, oh my God, I'm the only person going through this. This is so embarrassing that my kid was in the paper. Go ahead and click on that, Mike. That's embarrassing, obviously. I'm not going to say it's not. I hope that's not for any of my kids any day. But the bottom line is one thing about that. Still alive. Your kid's Facebook page could be his IDOC corrections page. That's kind of embarrassing. But still, you're alive. And your kid's alive. You can get your arms around him. There's still a chance to treat him. Still a chance to help him out. And it's so much hope we have for our kids, particularly in a town like Naperville, to have something like that happen. It's tragic. But they're still alive. And they can make an impact in other people's lives by beating it and getting the word out and saying, hey, I walk the walk. I only have so much credibility. I'm not an addict. I had nothing to beat yet. Hopefully I never will be. The bottom line is that's what you're looking at. Or you could look at these two situations. You could have the RIP page, the Facebook page. Your kid's Facebook page flips from him being in Facebook, showing crazy pictures of jumping on a trampoline or going to graduation, to all these crocodile tear friends crying about, oh, I miss you so much, bro. but these were the same guys that were doing heroin with them and left them for dead. They took their stuff and took off. And then some, in some great indignities, later on came back to the house a couple weeks later, and this actually happened in town that we know of, and tried to rob the house from the house of the kid that passed away. So heroin knows no boundaries. And all this stuff of crying and whining, the bottom line is your kid's not coming back. And all the friends that are on there telling you how much they miss him should have done something like the chief says. Chief Dial said, if you knew a kid was going to kill himself, would you stand up and do something to stop it? You would not stop at anything to fix it. But in this case, you just say, hey, man, he's just doing drugs, whatever. Same thing, 50-50 mix. I'd be interested to see if the same stats were that involved with people that attempted suicide by other means. Probably not. But the bottom line is that's what you look at. Or then the final photograph you get of your kid is not a graduation photo, it's the coroner's photo. The last public servant that your kid will deal with will be a coroner. And in plain, no messing around terms, when you get a butterball turkey, you find all of its innards inside of it to make something out of it. That's what basically a coroner's inquest is when they're checking you out. They basically check it out, see what's right, what's wrong, verify what you passively passed away from. They put basically your stuff back in a bag and send it back to your parents. Nobody but nobody in this town deserves to see that prematurely. There's too many things that can kind of take you away. You realize that you're less likely to die in combat if you came from Naperville than you were from doing heroin. I mean, examine those two things. Think about it. What can you do to help? Like we talk about, this is the email that I've gotten from a citizen in town that saw one of those houses developing. I'm glad she's on our side, because if I was doing something wrong, I definitely wouldn't want those pictures up there. But the bottom line is you're providing information that could save somebody's life. It's not a matter of stop snitching. We don't live in that kind of town anyway. The bottom line is you look at that and you say, all right, I'm giving you information. My kid had a problem. I'm doing what I can do to get some help. And maybe I just need to reach out to the parents of this kid. Look on his Facebook page, her Facebook page. Look on her phone, see who they're calling the most. Reach out to that parent and say, I'm not sure if you know what's going on. This is very embarrassing for me, but I want to let you know that my kid's got an issue and we're taking care of it. I want to let you know that your kid was hanging around with my kid. Maybe they'll never be friends again. How many people went to high school and then went away and came back? Pretty much all of us, I think. Went off to college, did whatever. What do high school friends mean to you by and large? You move on and meet new people. If you're concerned about burning somebody up, I would say your kid's life's more important than that. Share information. The police are here for people that don't get it. We understand people have problems. They need to take care of it through addiction, counseling, whatever. But there's a lot of people that just say, I don't care. I'm not going to do that stuff. Okay, has anybody ever seen the show Intervention? How often do you watch that show and you see that and the kids are like, I'm not doing it. Until somebody sits down and sets a limit to them. Claudia is great at that. I love her. I mean, I love just listening to her talk because it's all about, you got to draw lines. You got to understand there's a situation. But there's a big difference between sympathy and empathy. And that's what we're talking about. And the police can be involved to give you back your most precious commodity. We need to be involved. We're not going to stop until we can do what we can do. Again, our numbers for arrests may go up, but our goal is to drive the deaths down through education and awareness for people. On that note with education, I know you can't read this. I can't even read it, and I got 20/20 vision. But the bottom line is there's a list that was given out in packets, if you got one of the packets, as well as, you can click on that first one. Educate yourself to these things. This is just a few of the myriad of things that you can look at. You want to know what compiled statutes are? Does anybody even know what the compiled statutes are? It's the laws that govern us criminally, civilly, whatever. You can look it up on a webpage to understand. Well, if I find this kind of pill on my kid, what would he be charged with? What could he or she be charged with? Drug Paraphernalia Control Act is just one of them. You can go to that Illinois General Assembly page, look at all the compiled statutes, all the criminal statutes, what the sentencings are, what you can expect if you get arrested. You get arrested several times. Go on to the next one. Say you have a loved one, unfortunately, that gets arrested, or a neighbor that gets arrested. Here's a website that you can go on it, and you can check an inmate by name, see what they were in there and locked up for. There's also another website that the state's attorney's office has that can tell you what the status of the case is, what's going on. So if you call and say, hey, I want the police to do something about this, and then you think you can just wash your hand from it, folks, there's too few of us and too many of you. We're broke as a state. We have the biggest pension liability reform that needs to happen in the country in Illinois. And hiring more cops and more teachers and other people to take care of this for you, it just ain't going to be there. The money's not there. Until things change drastically the way we do business, that means folks need to get involved in more, need to educate themselves, need to be aware of what's going on. If you're concerned about something, all of us are here to help you, but understand you got resources to address it. But there's another one. Go ahead to the next one. If you got somebody that's locked up and you want to know when they're going to be released, It's a cool system called VineLink. You can click on that, put your cell phone number and email address. It'll notify you when that individual, whether it's a loved one, somebody you don't really love that much, a neighbor, whatever, for the entire country. You look at Illinois statewide other than Cook County, or maybe even in Cook County, put their name in, it'll send you a message via text in your phone or via email. This person's subject to release or has been released from a penal institution. So if you think a drug house is going on in your neighborhood, hey, they've been arrested, the police did their job, the person's been released, well, you're going to have an idea what's going on. You see something suspicious. We all got to be on our game here, folks, because it's the law of unintended consequences. Now, that problem's going on down in that house. Well, I say square away your own house with your own family, but when you start seeing things spiraling out of control in another house, hey, you need to step up. These are your neighborhoods. We come in for a few seconds. We can't undo in 17 minutes what's been going on for 17 years.
We receive a lot of tips from people. We encourage people to call in. We get a lot of tips during the day, and we try as hard as we can to investigate all of them fully. You can call in, you can leave your name. You don't even have to leave your name. But the key is opening up communication. We need everyone's help.
Go ahead to the next one. Another one of the resources is the DEA resource for parents. That's a pretty kind of a neat page. It kind of gives you all a bunch of different resources on understanding text, all sorts of things. It tells you about drugs. There's DEA publications that you can print in a PDF form at your own home. What I've done is we have compiled this these are just a group of them that we have that's in that packet. But I also had an email sign-up sheet out there. And again, I'm not going to be sending you emails about the FOP and donate and all that other stuff. I'm going to send you links about basically this, so you can have it on your phone, because it's easier to operate from your phone than typing a path, and you can have it on iPhone apps or whatever it is that you got. All this technology is there for you. The bottom line is, folks, is we want to educate you so you can take more of an involvement in this. Again, there's 10 of us that handle drugs specifically in town. There's 165 police officers. Not all of them are assigned to the street, and there's too many of you guys and not enough of us. We need your help, and folks need to be involved. Give us some good direction. I mean, help us direct our resources to affect real problems. If you just want somebody driven out of your neighborhood, call a squad car every time you can. If you want an investigation to be conducted, one, you got to have patience. Two, you got to stay on top of it so you know what's coming of it, because we have to move on to the next investigation. And keep us in the loop as well. I can't tell you how many moms that I've dealt with that have been huge sources of, I mean, if the CIA really wanted some good agents, they should just hire moms. I mean, seriously. The information they give, I'm like, you're not watching me, are you? But they give us a lot of good stuff and a lot of good information. Again, you got to look at it like, hey, it's not my business. You might be saving somebody's life, particularly when you're talking about heroin. That being said, I think we're done. I think we got it done within the hour, too. So,
thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate it.
Our next presentation will be made by Claudia Evenson, who is a certified supervisor, drug and alcohol counselor. Claudia has been working in DuPage County in the western suburbs for a long time, because I've been at 7 different high schools and her name came up at every single one of them. So she has a tremendous amount of credibility in our communities. Claudia Evenson.
7 different high schools. Can you guys hear me okay? Is my mic working? Yes? There are 5 truths that I want to talk about tonight. The first one is that we have lost precious children here in Naperville due to the drug heroin. The second truth is that most of our kids in Naperville are making healthy choices. We need to provide support for those kids and to help those who are not using, and to acknowledge and support the ones who are. Research shows that when we reinforce healthy behavior, it repeats itself. I want you to know that I've been in the trenches for a long time. That's why I tell people I look like this. 30 years, and I've raised 4 of my own. And I want you to know that there are lots and lots of recovering kids here in Naperville, kids who are working a program of recovery. And they're doing very well, and I want to see us support those kids as well. The third truth is that heroin use doesn't exist in a vacuum. The third truth that if you take anything with you tonight, I would ask you to take this. That heroin use begins with experimentation of marijuana, prescription drugs, and alcohol. I want to say that again. Heroin use does not exist in a vacuum. It begins with experimentation of marijuana, alcohol, tobacco, and oftentimes prescription drugs. The reason that is so important is because I do assessments all day. And what we see, I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but what we see in the assessment is parents who are saying, thank God it's only weed. Thank God it's just Oxycontin or Norco. Did you take Daddy's pills when he had his back surgery? Oh, that's all it was, Claudia. So that is a truth. That is one of the symptoms of addiction in a family system. The fourth truth is, for those of you who are as old as me, and I think I'm probably one of the oldest in the room, except for April. Is she here? Yeah. Hi, April. I had to say that, April. We've done this before, you know. Oh, and Sandy Stelmach, too. We've done this before here in Naperville in 1999. You can look in the archives of the Naperville Sun, and you will see pictures of people like me and many others who fought this battle before. And together with the police and the school and the churches and the entire community, we banded together and we ran it out of town. And again, the people who were most instrumental with that were the parents. And that is the fifth truth. Parents have power. You guys, as moms and dads, have more power than the schools, more power than the police in many ways, because your kids care what you think. And certainly, while they're experimenting, you're very worried about them. And one of the things that we hear the most often in the field of chemical dependency, parents say, well, you know, Claudia, he won't quit. They say, so what am I supposed to do? You know, I just want to get him out of high school. And anyway, he says he's only smoking 2 or 3 times a week. It's not a problem. He's not using it every day. This is what I hear every single day from very loving, well-meaning parents who are afraid to look at the truth. And our job, whether we're neighbors or friends or counselors or teachers, is to help each other come to believe and face the truth about what's going on with our children. And so tonight, I've been asked to talk a little bit, and I'm not going to take much of your time, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can actually do. You know, we can all talk about, well, what are we going to do? You know, being a mother of 4 and having a husband who's a psychologist, that's interesting too, by the way. When you're raising 4 kids, you know, they think you're neurotic. I want to smell your breath. I want to look at your pupils. They know that you're a little bit wacky because, you know, you're just nervous all the time. Fortunately, today, they have all grown up, and they're probably stricter with their little ones than I ever was, because I have truly made them neurotic about drugs and alcohol. And my goal is to make you guys just as neurotic, because you know what? What Sean and Mike said tonight is absolutely true. Every piece of what they talked about when kids start to get honest, I've seen in treatment, because I've worked in treatment centers and hospitals and chemical dependency programs, and I get to see them on their 3rd day after detox. And then I get to see them again the week after they've been in treatment. And then I get to see them 2 weeks later, and that's when the truth starts to come out. Mom and Dad, I really wasn't smoking 2-3 times a week. I was smoking 2-3 times a day. Remember when I used to say weed should be legalized? I don't think so anymore. They start to turn the 3rd week, the 4th week, and then at the time of discharge, kids are saying, man, I'm afraid to go back home. I'm afraid to go into my school. I'm afraid to go into my neighborhood. I'm even afraid to get on the school bus because it's all, you know, it's everywhere. And I'm not just talking about Naperville. I'm talking about this is true across the country. And so, what do we do about all this? The first thing we do is we learn the truth that kids who learn about drugs and alcohol at home are 50% less likely to experiment. Let's think about that for a minute. 50%, that's a lot. What does it mean to learn about drugs and alcohol at home, you might be thinking? Do I sit them down at the kitchen table and say, don't do weed? I know, you know. Yeah, you know, you take the opportunity when a TV show comes on or when you're alone in the car, all the things that you're already doing. My guess is that you're probably not the parents who need to hear our message tonight. It's all the people who couldn't be here, whose kids your kids are hanging out with. Everybody needs to hear this message. 50% are less likely to experiment. And what is experimentation anyway? Keep it simple. How many times do you have to eat pizza before you know you like it or not? 1 time? 3 times? 10 times? Mom, I'm only using on weekends, Saturdays, once a month. It's social use, recreational use. Most parents that I see, and by the time they get to me, they're in trouble. Somebody has sent them, you know, you don't end up in an office like mine by accident. Somebody has sent them because other people have seen signs and symptoms. And so, what can you do? You can monitor where they are. Monitor who they are with. Monitor what time are they going to be home. What are your expectations? And if you have little ones, you start this as soon as they can talk. Where are you going to be? In the living room playing with your toys? Mommy's going to be in the kitchen doing dishes. I'm going to be checking on you in 10 minutes. You get them used to the idea that it's safe here. Parental safety. My parents are looking over me and out for me. They're going to ask me all my life where I am. Get them used to the idea. Be a snoop. You know, in the old days meaning back in the 80s, there were lots of people who were writing books about trust and how you don't snoop on your kids because you really want them to trust you. And you look at your kid and say, you know, it's all right, honey, if you want to have a lock on your bedroom door. You know, we trust that you're not doing anything in there. You know, you hear that? No locks. No locks on the bedroom door. Be suspicious if there is one. Be suspicious if your son or daughter is having secretive phone calls. Be suspicious if you're wanting to ask them about texting. What does that mean when you said you were going to buy a dime bag? Why did she text you and ask you to bring something to a party? What does that mean? And what does that kid say to you? You got no business reading my texts. It's none of your business, right? I can tell you that's, you know, my kids, thank God I didn't have to deal with cell phones, but let me tell you, they accused me of all kinds of things. It's my room. You have no right to come in here. Well, I trust you, but I don't trust the world is a good answer. You know, you're living in a world where lots of people are experimenting and using and smoking, and I want to be here to protect you. Age-appropriate limits, meaning we don't give 12-year-olds a 10 o'clock curfew. Sometimes when I talk to middle school parents, they say to me, do you think 10 o'clock is too late for Cindy to be home on a Wednesday night? Yes. My son or daughter is 16, and do you think that it's okay because so many kids are using that they should be in by 7 o'clock? No. Age-appropriate limits are very important. Don't allow your kids to go into unsupervised homes. The majority of parties take place right after school. Sometimes kids will say to us as parents, hey, you know, Bill's parents aren't home right now, but they're going to be back by 3:30. I can toke up and do lots of stuff in that half hour. So no unsupervised homes. Don't allow children to come into your home if you're not home. You got to have a united plan and be a united front, obviously, as parents. Both parents have to be saying the same thing. One of the things that are really true about kids who are experimenting or using or are dependent is that they lie. They call, we've done seminars called the honesty of deceit, because deceit is part of people who use. Let's think about this for a minute. If I'm 15 and I want to get high tonight at a party with my friends, I have to lie about, and I see some of the kids in the audience chuckling. That's good. They have to lie. They lie to themselves. They lie to their parents about where they're going to be. They lie about where they're going to get their weed. They lie about where it's going to be stashed. They lie about where they're going to go. And after a while, it becomes a lifestyle. After the second use or the third use or the fourth use, the teenager sometimes finds out that, hey, nothing bad happened to me. I didn't go blind or anything. All those things really aren't true. I might as well keep experimenting. In the office, when we do assessments, we see kids who'll say, one of the questions I've learned to ask is, have you ever been a dealer? No, I've never been a dealer. I would never do that. Have you ever been a middleman? Oh yeah, I've been a middleman. Now our district attorney is going to talk here in a bit, and hopefully she'll address exactly what dealing means, because our kids have minimized the word from dealing to middleman, meaning that I'm the guy in the middle. I just get it from my friends, Claudia, and I give them a discount. I'm just the middleman. In a court of law, the judge doesn't care what you call yourself. You're dealing drugs, taking money, it's called dealing, right? But if you don't ask the right question with teenagers who are using, you won't get the right answer. Because as Sean and Mike said, people who use are generally very manipulative. Kids who have been sober a year or two come back to us and they say, man, Claudia, you cannot believe how I lied to you in that assessment. I'm like, really? But you went to treatment. Kids know that they have to lie to be able to survive the day, especially as Mike and Sean were talking about kids who are using heroin. Another thing you can do is to not allow any excuses, the unending excuses. You know what I mean by that if you're a parent of a teenager. Well, I was over here, and then the car stopped, and Bill's mother called, and we had to run over there, and she had to go to the dry cleaner, so we had to stop at the dry, and that's why I'm 6 hours late, Mom. You never believe me. Just because you came from Grandma and Grandpa, you know the story. It swirls about. So I would encourage you as moms and dads to stand your ground. Don't allow endless excuses, because that is a form of enabling. It's allowing kids to minimize their behavior. And remember, kids who experiment often will be dishonest. So if you're a snooper, like I was, and I still am. If you are a snooper, what do you do if you find something? If you're a snooper, that means that there's something going on, that you're checking out this kid's bedroom. You're sneaking in there, you're opening the drawer, you're looking for foil, you're looking for razor blades, you're looking for a pipe, It's good to be a snooper, like I said, but there's something going on with you. Are you worried that this kid is using? Because I'm a big believer that parents who snoop have really good guts. Sometimes we have to follow what our guts are telling us. So if you suspect that they're using, what do? You sit down and you ask them, just like you would do. You do that with a quiet frame of mind. Not, I found a ball in your, wait till you're settled down, get some support, talk with your partner, and sit down and review. Hey, we found some substance in your room. Is this yours? Oh, no. Is that still in there? I'm holding that for Emily. Jeez, I got to give that back to her. That's what you'll hear most of the time. Truth is, if kids are bringing drugs into your home, more than likely it's theirs. Truth is, if they're smoking pot, they may be smoking it in your home. Like Sean and Mike said, they walk in the house, they can smell it. They come into my office, I can smell it all over the room, all over their clothing. And their parents can too, but the kids sit there and they say, I wasn't smoking earlier today. So you ask them, you assess what's going on, and then you need to act. Those consequences that we talked about, very important that you set the limit and that you set the consequence. Whatever the consequence is, what most parents today tell me, which are really good things, they say, you know, we took the cell phone away, and we took his computer away, and we upped the ante, and then we did this, we reduced his curfew, and now here we are, because nothing is working. By that time, it generally means that the student is beyond experimenting. Because you know, addiction is a medical diagnosis. Did you know that? Most people believe that addiction is a behavior. And it starts out, there are many behaviors that go along with addiction, but addiction is actually a brain disorder. Once the person becomes an addict, it becomes a medical diagnosis. We know that it's a biopsychosocial spiritual illness. As parents, we can't deal with it. Biologically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually, it affects all people. It doesn't matter what race, what culture we come from, what gender we are. It just knows none of that. So it's important that we make sure that we are not enablers. So when we talk about kids letting us know sideways, lots of parents come in and they say, you know, I saw him on Facebook. He's standing there and he's, you know, holding up some booze in his hand. And when I asked him, he said, yeah, he was just holding it up to be funny. Okay. And in the meantime, school's been calling and saying, you know, here's what I see. Mom's looking at Dad. George, remember that teacher back in freshman year who used to call us and say his grades were going down? And I can see George is starting to come around because, like our police officers told us, dads are really hard to get to. Dads are people who say, this is a stage, this is something my son or daughter is going through. I have a husband who's a shrink who's exactly like that. So it's not that I'm putting down dads, it's just that sometimes it's the mom who is saying, and then remember that time the school social worker called and they said he had a pipe in his locker? Oh yeah. So mom sometimes carries the memories. And then you see the denial. People start to come around. Oh, and remember the time that he pushed you? But he didn't have drugs on him. But he had that attitude. These are signs that something's going on. Pay attention. Lots of times kids will go to their parents and they'll say, you know, I think I'm ADHD. I think I need some medicine. And the reason I think that is because my grades are down and I can't focus. Well, marijuana use and ADHD look very similar. So it's very important that before you give a kid medication for ADHD, you find out which is going on. Sometimes they're both going on simultaneously. Most often that's the case, but you're going to want to make sure. So kids will come to their parents and say, I want to get some medicine because they're looking for either, number one, another drug to get high, or they might want to sell their Adderall or their Ritalin, or they want to provide you with an excuse because it's much easier to say to Aunt Emily that Tommy has ADHD, not that Tommy has a drug problem. In our society, we're still embarrassed. We still don't get that this is a medical diagnosis. So if you find money missing, that's an obvious. If you find that your son or daughter has to sell things to get by, that's an obvious. That's looking at probably some late stage stuff. And if you smell anything funny, you know, parents say, well, all I ever smell are his gym shoes in his room. But we know that oftentimes, you know, the smell of marijuana is pretty distinct. And if you're smelling it, sometimes kids will say, well, I smoke it out in the yard. I don't bring it in the house. And the parents are like, Lisa's not bringing it in the house. Are you kidding me? So we as a community have to wake up people. We have to slap each other. I myself have been an administrator, a clinician, a program director. I've worked at every level. And I can't tell you how many times staff have had to come in to my office and say, Claudia, are you kidding me? You just let that kid manipulate you into a radio in her room just because she has braces and dimples and she's sweet. She's the biggest dealer in Will County. Ah, yeah, I say, I did. So surrounding ourselves with people who can tell us the truth and share with us what's really going on with us and with them is very important. Finally, on a last note, and we're going to be available for questions in a bit, but we are hosting, Rosecrans and 360 Youth Services are hosting May 3rd, which you'll be hearing more about, What Can I Say to Get Them to Quit seminar for parents only on May 3rd, coming up in just 3 weeks. And it's not given by me, but it's what can I say to get them to quit? Because we hear that a lot from parents. What can I say? You know, how can I make this happen for them? And so we want to be able to offer the parent support that you guys need, because oftentimes, while our kids are committing suicide, believe it or not, lots of parents commit suicide too. They get very depressed, they get very lonely, they feel very ashamed, and you guys don't even get to be anesthetized. You got to walk around feeling it all day long. So I suggest you follow your guts. Remember when they were 3 months old, 6 months old, 9 months old, and you held them in your arms and you said, this baby's sick. And you took them to the pediatrician and the doctor said, no, he's fine, take him home. And at 2 in the morning, they wake up and they have 104 fever. Mothers, you know what I mean? You said, I knew this kid was sick 12 hours ago. Not much has changed. Follow your guts, and your school staff are always there for you. I know them, and if you have any questions, you can always call any one of your school social workers, who, by the way, as I'm ending, I think we should ask them to stand up and give them a round of applause, because you guys, the school social workers, so people know who you are, would you mind standing up so we can at least say thank you? These are the people who help identify what's going on with our students. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Claudia. The third part of our program is going to come up. We're going to take a quick break first, but let me tell you what we want you to do during the break. The third part of our program is a half an hour, just a half an hour, and we'll end it at that point. And it will be a panel, and we'll assemble the panel up here. Up on the screen are instructions for how you can ask questions. There are 2 ways you can do it, and you don't have any obligation to do it. One is out in the hallway. There are a couple of kiosks with laptops sitting on them, already set up for you to type a question in, and then it gets entered. Don't log out, by the way. Just enter the question and walk away. And the other way you can do it is on your smartphone. You can just go to that URL and enter the question through the smartphone. It will arrive backstage where 3 of the other social workers are arrayed, and they will distribute those questions to the panel, and you'll be able to see them too. The panel will self-moderate because the questions will be on the screen down there, and they'll just go with those questions for a half an hour, and then we'll be done.
Generally see. And obviously, if you find something in a student in your son or daughter's room, paraphernalia of some kind, or if they get a drinking ticket, sometimes police are involved. Right, Sean?
Yes.
Yeah. As long as I have the police's approval, it's good. That's good.
By way of the school, too, we would like you to make sure that you look for any slippage of grades, any sudden change in a peer group, any change in the way your son or daughter dresses. Even if they're subtle kinds of things, they could indicate that your child has mixed with something else.
One thing particularly with heroin, what we see is you will notice either a male or female, a loss of weight. We call it the heroin chic. They start to almost look skeletized after a while because the body mass is starting to drop. Also, too, you'll see a disruption of the skin, almost to a point where it looks like really severe acne and sometimes a lot of scratching. But probably the most prominent signs, and this is actually, someone who's been using quite a bit, as time goes on, they're going to start dropping a lot of weight and looking really skinny.
The role of the schools, and Officer Davis is here. He is our school resource officer at Naperville North High School. But what I want to reiterate to our parents and to plead with our parents is that the school is available to partner with you. There is no one entity that can fight drug abuse in this community. It's not just mom and dad alone. It's not the school alone. It's not the police alone. It's all of us together. So I know sometimes parents are apprehensive about talking to the school about something that's very private, very personal, that has to do with your children. But we're here because we love your kids too. And we're here because we want to help you. This is a tough time for the kids. And we are committed to partnering, committed to providing you resources to get help for your sons and daughters. And we are committed to working with those people on the outside to provide an environment that is conducive to healing and success here at Naperville North High School.
I get a question on this one. My son brought home something called Spice. He says it's legal and safe. What are your thoughts about this? It's not legal and it's not safe, first and foremost. Dependent upon what it is, it's something that the laws are just catching up with it, and it's gotten down to chemistry, basically, the molecular level of this stuff. That's what can be charged for it or not. But from a parent's perspective, K2, Pep Spice, anything that looks kind of weird that somebody's smoking, ingesting bath salts, any of that stuff, it's all considered a synthetic type drug. And some of the things that we're seeing from it in law enforcement and in hospitals is that we recently lost a kid in Aurora, a young man that consumed some of it and ended up crashing into a house. I met the mom at a presentation, and the story was kind of national news because they don't know the effects of it. If it's being sold, obviously, as the police, we'd like to know where it's being sold because, unfortunately, a lot of it's coming in through convenient marts and things along those lines. Doing a good job of trying to get the word out, but the chemistry of it, the labs are trying to catch up to it as well. Somebody can change something at a molecular level by one molecule, and now that that's something that's not legislated and covered, we have to send it out to the labs, the results have to come back. You can bring it to us and we'll do what we can to test it for you, if it's even something that's testable. But bottom line is it's not legal and it's definitely not safe because a lot of kids are going to the hospitals overdosing on it.
I'd like to add to that as well. Is this on? Yeah, they just told us to speak into the mic. One of the first times that I learned about bath salts, it's called Ivory Snow, Vanilla Sky, if you hear those words. When we think about bath salts, we think about Calgon, at least my generation did. But bath salts, as the officer said, is very, very dangerous. And one of the ways I learned about it was through a young adult. He was a college student, 20 years old, came into the office, and the parents reported extreme paranoia. Paranoia that got to the point where he was hospitalized twice psychiatrically. And of course, he didn't tell anybody he was doing bath salts because mom and dad were paying for his college tuition. So finally he admitted what he was using, and I was like, bath salts? This was a couple years back. And we've seen more and more of it among our college-age kids. So did you want to say something?
Oh, no. Well, that's true as well. So these K2, the spices, you can buy them at convenience stores and gas stations. So when you're filling up your tank and your kid wants to run in for something, look to see what they're buying. They come in little packets. that look, they're very small. They're only about 4 inches, very thin. That's one packet, costs between $15, $40, and that's a controlled substance just like heroin or cocaine. So if they're caught with that, they will be charged just like they had cocaine or heroin. It is controlled. And the kids don't think it is because they're buying it from gas stations, but it still is. I think this next one's for me. I can only read the top half, though. What are the drug laws today in Illinois? If a person is caught dealing heroin, what is the sentence? And Mike or Sean has to read the bottom for me, please.
The second part is, why not a mandatory sentence of 5 to 10 years if you are caught and convicted in dealing heroin?
Okay. The drug laws today, they're divided into 2 categories. There's a Cannabis Control Act that just deals with cannabis, and then the rest of the drugs are covered under the Illinois Controlled Substances Act. So for a typical person that's just charged with possessing drugs because they're an addict, typically for heroin, since we're at a heroin presentation, if it's less than 15 grams, it's a class 4 felony, and that's the lowest, least serious class felony that you can have. You can get probation, or you can be sentenced up to 3 years in the Department of Corrections. If it's higher than 15 grams, it's a class 1 felony, and you can go to prison for between 4 and 12 years, in the Illinois Department of Corrections. Now, with regards to dealing with heroin, if it's less than 1 gram of heroin, it's a class 2 felony, and that's probation. But if you go to prison, that's 3 to 5 years in the Department of Corrections. If it's between 1 and 10 grams, then you can go to prison as well, and that's a class 1 felony, 4 to 12 years in the Department of Corrections. I'm sorry, 4 to 15, it's 1 to 15 grams is 4 to 12 years in the Department of Corrections. If it's over 15 grams, so if it's 15.1 grams, that's a class X felony, and you're mandatory going to prison for a minimum of 6 years. If it's over 100 grams, it gets higher. You go to prison for 9 years, then 12 years, 15, and it goes on and on from there. It is a mandatory minimum of 6 years in prison if it's more than 15 grams of heroin. But there are treatment options, like through the courts. It's not just going to prison. There's options through court. There's probation, and probation also has inpatient drug treatment. There's a special program called TASK, which is a treatment program offered through probation. There's also sentencing and diversionary programs. A program is called drug court. I think Sean mentioned it during part of his presentation. And drug court is a sentencing alternative. So if your child gets caught with drugs and they qualify for drug court, they go through this program where they do inpatient treatment, a halfway house, they come to court on a weekly basis, then their felony might get dismissed, or the felony gets reduced to a misdemeanor. Or instead of going to prison, they just get probation. So there's sentencing options and alternatives as well.
Okay, this next question, what are meaningful consequences if I catch my kid using? Meaningful is what's meaningful to the individual. So some kids who are computer hounds, you might want to take the computer away. If they're experimenting. Cell phones, it's always a big one. Most parents, automatically start with that. It's the most obvious. Consequences have to be meaningful for them to work. With a vast majority of kids, consequences do work. Once, as I said earlier, once they stop working, that means you've got a bigger problem. This is a tough question.
It basically reads, are there any good ways I can monitor my child's whereabouts, cell phone, car, etc.? In the handout that we created for you in part of the presentation, there are some things that we don't necessarily endorse, or we don't endorse product-wise because it's a cost to do it. But cell phones, carriers, each individual company has its own ways of tracking GPS-wise, things along those lines. We've included a lot of that in the presentation for you to kind of go through, like to monitor your kids' phone activity, texting activities, what they're doing on the internet with the personal computer, as well as iPass, things along those lines. Again, remember, this is not all fail-safe stuff. We've seen everything on our own where kids know their parents are watching their phone. They ditch the phone at a friend's house, and then they roll down to the city to pick up with somebody else. So it's a non-ending game. One of the things we say to parents, well, I looked at my kid's phone, he doesn't have any text messages. I don't know about you guys, but I had a 6-year-old, and he knows how to text already. I mean, if your kid doesn't have text messages in their phone, they're hiding things from you, and it's something you need to be aware of. Again, it's tough. Like we had said earlier, like Claudia said, you're going to snoop, you're going to monitor, you're going to be monitored for the rest of the life in everything you do. The bottom line is there's a lot of technology out there. I researched it a little bit on the internet. Talk to your cell phone provider to see what they allow for you, because some of it for a fee you can get, and I'll see what text messages, even if things are deleted. Some companies hold them longer than others. You can't believe how much they actually communicate with each other via Facebook if you're not watching it. And the other thing you got to look for on Facebook is you think you're looking at what their Facebook page is, and it's all nice, puppies and flowers, and then they've got a real Facebook page that their friends are all signed up with. That's something that you can do through monitoring your computer activity. Basically, it's if you've gotten to the point where you need to, we say trust but verify. Trust your kids, tell them you trust them what it is, but you're going to verify what they're doing, because for the rest of their lives, somebody's going to be doing it, a boss, their wife, a coworker, whatever. There's no real easy answers to that other than it's going to take some research.
Just adding to what Sean said too about iPass, I had a conversation with a parent not too long ago who noticed a lot of activity going on at the toll plazas, particularly getting on I-355 and then hitting at the Meyer Toll Plaza going into the city. And there's no reason for that, and that usually means that something else is going on. So be suspicious of that. If you can call iPass. I still believe that when you get your monthly statement, if you want a monthly statement, depending upon what plan you have, they will give you an itemized list of where the tolls are hitting at, almost like how your credit card's used. So I would check into that.
The answer to that is absolutely no. Most kids who are using will attempt to dilute their urine. Meaning I've seen kids who have put, water in the urine or bluing or bleach. One good thing about urine toxins screens that are done in occupational health departments or treatment centers is they will tell us if it's been diluted. So like if you buy a drug screen over at Osco or Walgreens, that's fine. But if it comes back negative and you're still feeling like, boy, I swear this kid is using, it just might mean that they've altered it somehow. So, but urine screens are a good place to start, absolutely.
One of the things we've seen, believe it or not, is actually when we've made a couple different stops, there's a water bottle of yellow fluid in the car. And we kind of get the idea of what it is. And the individual that told us said, my mom, tests me, so I got this girl to do it that doesn't do any drugs. If you're going to drug test your kids, I don't know if any of you were in the military, but we had to do it all the time when I was, somebody stood there and watched you do it. And if your kid doesn't like that, that's too bad. You're going to go that far to do urine analysis on your kid, you need to make sure that they're actually doing it. Stand in the bathroom with them, stand there with the door open, because you'd be surprised how many parents go, I tested him, he was clean, I can't believe it. Well, we just arrested him with 2 grams of heroin. Oh, wow, I never saw it coming. 2 grams of heroin is a lot of heroin for an individual. So that's just something we say is like, again, trust but verify. Hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to stand there and watch you do it. You're not going to pour water and you're not going to lock the door. Oh, Mom, I'm embarrassed. I've seen you when you were urinating ever since you were a little kid. So, it's real easy to do.
Along the same line, there's something I wanted to bring up. I'm glad Sean prompted me in this. We were talking about nodding out earlier. One of the things we see a lot is when parents come in and they have a urine tox done, they'll say, we think he's been sick a lot. He looks like he has the flu. And so when we hear that, we know sometimes kids are detoxing from heroin, because when you are detoxing, you look like you have the flu. The aches, the pains, the vomiting, as well as, do you know what nodding out is? It's a literal, looking like they're falling asleep. I can do an impersonation of it, but not up here very well. But I think Sean mentioned that earlier as well, so be on the watch for that.
The question, what advice or suggestions do you have to a parent who has a 16-year-old in their home using? And then second, the same question for a 19-year-old. I think that we've heard it tonight, and the first thing you need to do is listen, and you need to ask questions. You need to wait until you're in that proper frame of mind, like Claudia said, and be able to have that conversation, preferably both parents if you can, with that student, with your child. And then if you need help and you need resources to ascertain what level this is, that's when you seek out the school for a resource, or you seek out someone like Claudia. In this community, we're very fortunate, Naperville Central and North both have a relationship with Edward Hospital that provides an assessment for free. I know that many people are worried about that these days. Oh my God, this is gonna be, but we need to think about your kids' safety. So you can take that student to Edward Hospital 24 hours a day, and they will do an assessment. There's a little extra charge for a drug screening, but it is worth it and it's nominal. But you need to do what you can to seek out the resources and then work with the school, and we'll work with the professionals too.
I think that's really important, that we are blessed in this community with so many providers. There's one on every corner who can do an assessment for you. If you are uncomfortable going into a hospital, if you are uncomfortable going to a provider, call your school social worker, because they know the ins and outs of how to make some of these kinds of things happen in terms of intervention. So the question also about the 19-year-old, is there one up there about yes, the same about a 19-year-old. What do you do if you know a 19-year-old is in your house and they are using? My opinion, and I agree that I'm very impassioned and opinionated on this topic, and I apologize, but if they're not willing to quit using and they're not willing to get help, they need to live somewhere else. It's just quite that frank. And if you can't ask them to leave, and if you're having trouble with that, go get some family therapy for yourself, get some support to figure out what to do. What I hear a lot is that parents are afraid to let their kids go out on the street. They say, well, he's only 19, he's going to get in more trouble if I don't let him live here. Trust me when I tell you, 19-year-olds who are using that actively in the home, they do just fine without us as parents. They find a couch to sleep on, they go to friends' houses. Sometimes parents tell me they feel grateful if they do get arrested, because then they're in jail and they know they're safe. So I know that's a rough statement to hear, but that's the truth of it when people are in the middle to late stages of addiction.
The question is, what can you do with old prescriptions or drugs that are left over in your house? I've heard that they can be taken to the police station rather than flushing them down the toilet. That's absolutely correct. The police department, in conjunction with the Drug Enforcement Agency diversion groups who deal with prescription medications, I think we run, is it once a year, Nick, or twice a year? The one coming up. We run a day, it's usually on a Saturday or Sunday. We set up in Safety Town. It's usually put out in the paper, I believe, and advertised, for people to bring all their old meds, and we will collect all of it and dispose of it properly. It's not recommended to flush down the toilet, obviously, because it pollutes our water supply, and we don't want to be drinking all that stuff. But check the newspaper. I think if you go on the city's website, they might be posting something soon about it. But we do set a date for it, and it works out pretty well. We've had a pretty good response for it. I believe also, and I could be wrong, but Walgreens and CVS pharmacies during certain times of the year will run the same type of program too, where they'll take drop-offs at their pharmacies of anything that you guys don't want.
One other place that takes them year-round is Fire Station 4. Chief Thoreau said it at one of the previous briefings that we've done. You can go, it's the one at Brookdale and Route 59, if you know where that's at. They'll take them year-round, dump them for you, and no matter what time of day it is. I mean, there's hours up there and things like that, but basically it's the same place you go to dump oil-based paints and old chemicals and stuff like that. They'll take your prescription meds too.
me. That's a tough question, and you know what? I had to face that myself at one time. And the thing that I always suggest is that you have expectations. Where is that person supposed to be? Are they going to call you every hour? Do you want your child to call you every hour to let you know that they are indeed home? Is homework going to be done while this unsupervised time is happening? Are friends allowed in the house, which, as you know, is a no? Are they allowed to go to other people's homes unless you've talked to the parents? The right answer to that is no. So you still continue to monitor, and actually some of that is good because you learn how to trust, and the child learns how to be somewhat autonomous from mom and dad. So some of that can be an okay thing as long as the child is monitored and you know that that child is safe. Do you guys feel like that answered the question? Yeah. I think we missed that one.
I got it. So that question essentially was, how young is too young before we start educating our students about drugs and alcohol? Also, is it appropriate to start having these conversations while the student is in grammar school?
It is never too young to start teaching children about medicine. When you're giving them cough medicine and they're 3, we should say, oh, this is medicine, and in 3-year-old language, that it will help your cough, but it's, as we get old, as the child gets older, explaining all those kinds of things. Kindergarten kids, 1st grade, 2nd grade, we do a great job of that in our elementary schools here in the school district and the junior highs, where there's education about what we can do to help our children say no. So it's really never too young. They're never too young.
So this question is about discretion for the state attorney or the police in charging a misdemeanor or a felony, and about charging first-time offenses. With regards to this, possessing a controlled substance and heroin, the only charge that you can have is a felony. That's how the statutes are written. So the officers have no discretion if they find well, I guess they somewhat do, but they have the opportunity to contact an assistant state attorney such as myself, who's the one that gives the approval as to whether or not to charge the felony. But typically, if a person is found in possession of a controlled substance, they would be charged with a felony. Now, just because they're charged with a felony does not necessarily mean that they will be a convicted felon and branded for the rest of their life. If the person is only 17 or if they have really no criminal history, they can obviously have a lawyer or contact the state attorney's office, contact the police department, and show that they're in drug treatment or they are trying to do steps to change their behavior, change their friends, that their parents are now involved, that their other siblings are aware of what's going on, and request that the felony be reduced to a misdemeanor so it doesn't be a conviction, a felony conviction on their record for the rest of their lives.
With that, the person that's going to determine largely how that turns out is the individual that's arrested. We tell them that when we're dealing with them. It's not a trick game in drug work. We've got what we've got. If we develop a much more elaborate case, we've worked closely with the state's attorney's office and generally a judge that's going to sign off on things that involved probable cause. What we do is we talk to anybody with a drug situation about, again, it's not a victimless crime, but it's a crime that they could start basically making better as soon as they start getting involved with it, meaning the police. So they're offered that opportunity several times in the forms of information, what they're willing to do, how cooperative they are. The state's attorneys ask us that when we screen it. How cooperative is this individual? Does this person have a criminal history? Does this person not have a criminal history? How are they being? Are they, they've got rights that they can adhere to, but in the same sense, they're the ones that know they're doing something wrong and they can start making it right away.
Okay, I've got this one. The teachers and the police seem to know who the problem kids are. Will they tip us if our kids get mixed up with the wrong group, or are we on our own? Just to give you a quick background, this is my 6th year as a school resource officer. Before I came to Naperville North, I was at Washington and Jefferson Junior High. Most of the kids that I need to know, I know, but I don't know all of them. To answer the question, I know what I know, and I know what I can prove. They're two different things. The one thing that I have going for me that patrol officers and officers such as Detective Ferguson and Umbenhauer I have an advantage with respect to search that I only need reasonable suspicion because I'm in the school. I don't need probable cause. If a kid comes and gives me a tip or comes to one of our deans or one of the counselors and says so-and-so may have drugs on them or drug paraphernalia, we have the right to search that student, their belongings, their lockers, and it's a good search. We've done it hundreds of times since I've been here. Most of them are successful, and that needs to stay that way. Now, with respect to the second part, I don't know if I'm reading it correctly, but will they tip you?
Will you tell the parents?
I'll tell, absolutely. I will. The first thing I will do is call the parents, and I'll give you, for instance, that occurred today. I checked the student's Facebook. The student was advertising how much they smoke cannabis. I notified the parent. The parent had no idea, but it's right there on Facebook. So we had that conversation with the parent today, and it worked out hopefully for the better. But kids will give us tips. They do it all the time. We have a lot of great kids here at Naperville North High School. I don't want you to come in here and think, oh my God, this is such a big problem. It is a big problem, but in comparison to the kids that are here doing the right things, it's a small percentage, but we feel a small percentage is too big of a percentage.
One thing that I would like to add to is the teenagers are going through some tough times occasionally and make a mistake. But I don't want to sit here and say that we're going to stigmatize your child. I don't want you to think by looking at the screen that your kid is one of those kids because he or she has been in trouble. Our first objective is to help your son or daughter, and give that student an opportunity to move on. That's what we really want to do. We don't want to brand that student forever either. I can answer this. Here at Naperville North High School and at Central both, if a teacher suspects that a student is under the influence of any substance, that teacher is to contact my office immediately. We will send a dean to the classroom, probably with a school nurse, depending on the circumstances, or at the very least, we will escort the student down to the nurse's office to make sure first that the student is safe, and secondly, so that a medical person can look at the child before we jump to any conclusions. So that's what we do. For an ongoing kind of issue where a teacher doesn't think maybe under the influence, but there's some odd behavior and some differences, we have mechanisms by which to trigger our teams also, where the teachers can actually record that narratively and send that to us too. So we're watching all the time.
Thank you, Jeff. I am Bill Wiesbrook. I'm the principal at Naperville Central High School, and out of respect for everyone's time, we've reached our limit for this evening. I'd like to start by just giving a nice round of applause to our panel tonight. You did an excellent job with those questions. I'd like to apologize. It looked like maybe a handful of questions didn't make it to the panel tonight. If you have a question, please feel free to seek out school personnel. All of our email addresses are on our school websites, or the police department with a question. I'm sure Claudia would be happy to take a question that didn't get answered as well tonight. I think everyone here tonight has one thing in common. Our school personnel, police department, parents, district administrators, and that one thing is that we all care about kids. And when you parents send your kids to our schools, we sort of act like their parents while they're at school. And we care about your kids, we care about all of them, and I agree, we're talking about a small percentage of our students. The majority of our students are making very good decisions, but we want to do everything that we can to prevent negative behaviors. Next Wednesday, all of our, or most of our students will take an anonymous survey that's called the Power of Choice, and many of those questions are about substance abuse. One of the questions asks students if they're involved in these types of behaviors, and the students that answer no, which are the majority of the students, are asked a follow-up question, and that question is, why not? And they're given many choices. And each year, the number one choice is, I don't want to disappoint my parents. And so I just want to emphasize, again, that parents play a very important role, and I think that came across loud and clear tonight. I'd like to wrap up by thanking, again, our school social workers. Naperville Central and Naperville North have collaborated this year with District 204 and District 200 to address this problem and share ideas. I'd like to thank the Naperville Police Department. I'd like to thank Claudia. I'd like to thank all parents. I'd also like to thank NCTV that came out tonight to share this with the community. So thank you, have a good evening, and be safe.